I imagine that people will continue to kind of join us in the next 5 minutes or so. But in the meantime, I think we'll get started. Good morning to those of you who are with us. My name is Lindy Lavender. I'm the Policy Director here at the East Bay Leadership Council. This is the East Bay Leadership Council's Water and Environment Task Force. I'm going to hand it quickly over to Dan McIntyre, who's going to kind of get our meeting started. Before I do, however, I just wanted to, again, welcome you. Thank you for being here. Let you know that we're going to ask you to stay on mute. And if for whatever reason you get unmuted, I might mute you. So to unmute yourself, you'll have to press that button again. If you have questions during the presentation, please put them in the chat. Dawn is going to be kind enough to moderate that chat for us during the question and answer session towards the end of our presentation. But if you come up with questions as we go through, I encourage you to put them in the chat so that we have them there and can hopefully get to them. Again, thank you for being here. And Dan, it's all yours.
Hi, I'm Dan McIntyre. I'm one of the co-chairs of the Water and Environment Task Force. So I'd like to welcome all of you for being here. Thanks for showing up for this great presentation. I just want to start off with some news items and then we'll dive into our topic. So I wanted to loop back. We had discussed 3 water projects that were water supply and environment projects that we wanted to support at a recent meeting. And we did in fact meet with representatives from the Water Board and also from Cal EPA back in October. We met with Kristen Peer, who's Deputy Secretary for Water Policy, also Eric Oppenheimer and Eric Ekdahl from the Water Board, and expressed our support for the sites, Vaqueros and one in Santa Clara Valley Water District's water project. So that was a successful meeting. So we're here today to talk about another presentation on decentralized water or recycled water use. As you may recall, we had a presentation maybe a year ago looking at it from a municipal perspective. We had the city of San Francisco describe their regulatory structure and how they were incentivizing recycled water use in development in San Francisco. And here we're to talk about the large-scale corporate side of recycled water use on corporate campuses. And we have Lauren Sweezy here, who's going to speak for Facebook, and we'll also be joined by Dennis Murphy from Sustainable Silicon Valleys to hear kind of like, for corporate campus, how does decentralized recycled water work? We have as our moderator today, Don Berger. He remains a workhorse for the Water and Environment Task Force. Seems like he's doing half of our work right now. So he's going to be moderating again for us today, and much appreciation for Don in putting this one together. Actually, Don's had this particular project in the hopper for a year. He's very excited about it. Every time I meet him, he talks about this project. So he's really even more enthusiastic than normal for Don Berger on this project. So I look forward to this presentation, his moderating, and some of the questions that he'll come up with. I wanted to give you some overview before Don takes over as the moderator on upcoming topics. So in December, we're taking our traditional holiday hiatus. So we will not have a meeting on December 15th, although the Water and Environment Planning team will meet that evening. Our work continues and we plan our agenda items for early next year. We have a lot of good topics already in the hopper, well developed for the turn of the year. So our next meeting will be after the holidays, January 19th. And the speaker is going to be from the Lawrence Livermore National Laboratory. And this is going to be on getting to neutral on carbon emissions. Then in February, we'll have an update on Phillips 66's Rodeo refinery and their proposed conversion of that facility to produce other forms of energy with biomass. And then in March, we have planned a water legislative update on some California water bills, maybe some other key environmental bills. And that'll be an opportunity for the task force to weigh in with recommendations on what to support and advocate for in the legislative season next year. We have a lot of topics in the hopper, but if there's something that's like, really burning, cutting edge, really rising to prominence, or time dependent, by all means share that with one of the planning team members or any of the co-chairs, or share it with Lindy, some idea to get in the hopper. We're always looking for great ideas. We're never locked in. We can always shuffle and shoehorn something in if it's particularly timely and appropriate. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to our moderator today, Don Berger, and he'll introduce the topic in detail and get us kicked off.
Thank you, Dan, and good morning, everyone. And just want to reiterate today that we are very privileged to have Lauren Sweezy here from Facebook to tell us about their new and innovative on-site reuse project at their headquarters office campus in Menlo Park. And we may also be joined by Marinus Lamprecht from Facebook, who's their construction manager.
He's online.
Okay, Marinus, hello, good morning. And as Dan mentioned, we have a special bonus today following Facebook's presentation, where Dennis Murphy from Sustainable Silicon Valley is with us, who will be giving us a regional perspective and commentary on trends in decentralized recycled water systems, and really more broadly in the South Bay, where other high-tech companies are also planning similar systems. And as you'll hear from Dennis, and I just want to also make a comment that the South Bay has been an area where these systems, the on-site commercial buildings, like at Facebook, on-site reuse commercial buildings can make sense under the right circumstances. They're not for every location, but down there they've worked for a number of folks and are under development at other locations there. And I'd also like to acknowledge Steve Moore, who's with us today. Hello, Steve, from Ross Valley Sanitary District in San Rafael. And Steve was previously the vice chair of the State Water Resources Control Board. And you may remember he also presented at our task force a couple of years ago. And we're really, thank you for joining us today, Steve. And while Steve was on the state board, Steve was instrumental in facilitating the permitting of the Facebook project, because this type of project, as you'll hear more from Lauren, it had never been done, certainly on this scale. Nothing had been done, and San Francisco is the only area in California that has their own permitting system, but nothing this large had ever been built there either. So it was really new for everyone, and Steve jumped in and found a way to do this. So I know that was much appreciated. And then let's see here. I will also just encourage you, we will have a Q&A session after each presentation, and just put your comments in the chat box. And as Lindy mentioned, I'll be moderating, so I'll make sure to get your questions out to our speakers. And with that, I'd like to go ahead and introduce our Facebook presentation and to introduce the topic. And Facebook just recently completed the installation of a district scale, which is a multi-building on-site reuse system to recycle wastewater that's generated from two buildings at their headquarters in Menlo Park. And these are two Frank Gehry designed buildings, as Lauren will tell you more about. And those of you who recognize Frank Gehry's style of architecture, he's famous for the Guggenheim in Bilbao, will probably recognize these buildings as you come off the Dumbarton Bridge right there into Menlo Park. They're sort of a flowing structure. You'll see a green roof with beautiful trees up there, so it's very, very nicely done. And as I mentioned, this was the first large-scale commercial building to be approved by California state regulatory agencies, and as well as local agencies there, who really didn't have a pathway or guidelines for this. So it was a long and challenging process for folks that weren't familiar with it. And our two speakers, Lauren Sweezy, who manages sustainability for Facebook Real Estate and Facilities, and Marinus Lamprecht, who's, I mentioned, their construction manager. And I want to say that I really have tremendous respect and admiration for Lauren and Marinus for their hard work and skill in navigating the significant challenges they faced in getting this project done, as you'll hear more about. But they believed in this project, and they stuck with it. They worked very hard to address everyone's concerns and the issues of the permitting agencies, so everyone's needs were met. And so my hat's off to you, both of you, for getting this done. So with that, I'd like to ask you to please help me welcome Lauren and Marinus. And Lauren, I think you're the first speaker.
Yeah, thank you, Don. That's a great introduction. I appreciate that. Before I start my presentation, I just wanted to ask there's quite a few people online. If anybody has been directly involved, besides Steve, because I know he was, with on-site systems, whether they've been involved in building, permitting, approving, whatever. I'm curious how much experience there is in this group with this type of system. Anybody? No, so that shows you, I guess, it's a new world out there, right? And we're all trying to navigate it. So it was a process, and I am going to bring up my presentation here. Oh, host disabled screen sharing, it says.
1 second.
Okay.
Okay, looks like you got it, Lauren.
Aha, all right. So let me get this in presentation mode, if I can bring it up so I can see it. There we go. All right, so as you can see, we're from Facebook. I am going to, there we go. So I wanted to familiarize everybody with where we are. I don't know how many of you drive around the Bay Area, come across the Dumbarton Bridge, but I think it's helpful to understand the context of where we are. So this is Willow Road here, and this is Bayfront Expressway that goes out to the Dumbarton Bridge. This is the old Sun Microsystems campus that we moved into in 2011. And I've been at Facebook since Palo Alto. I started in now 10 years ago. And so when we moved into this building, we immediately purchased just this segment across the way of an old, well, it was TE, or formerly Tyco Electronics. And then Raychem had been the original owner of this property. Well, sadly, Raychem had dumped a lot of chemicals in this particular area of the property, and it was a brownfield site. So we spent a lot of time before we built this first Frank Gehry building cleaning up the property. It had been cleaned up to, appropriate levels according to those in charge. But if we were going to have employees on the site, we needed it to be even cleaner. So we spent a lot of time hauling off soil, that kind of thing, and built this fabulous building. And then we purchased later the rest of the TE site all the way down here. And so that they remained there for quite a while, and we continued building and taking over their buildings as we moved on up, sort of, I guess that's west. Going to the next slide, you can see here, this is the opposite view. This is actually right when MPK 20, that's what we all of our buildings start with MPK. And if you wonder why, it's because when we first moved here, our head of facilities was trying to figure out what to name buildings. And he said, well, if there was an airport in Menlo Park, it'd probably be the letters would probably be MPK. So now all of our buildings are MPK, whatever. So this is MPK 20. And as Don said, it's our first Frank Gehry building. It actually, I have to say, looks nothing like a typical Frank Gehry building because, his buildings, as he was explaining, are quite phenomenal. But it actually looks like his own studio in Southern California. So when we built this, our CEO, Mark Zuckerberg, wanted everybody on one floor, one big room, he called it. And so this building is actually, let's see, I think it's a 535,000 square foot building, and everybody with a single floor and a green roof. And that's a 9-acre green roof. When we opened the building in 2015, the first thing the media focused on, they were seeing shots like this. It's like, oh, there's a big, we are in the middle of a severe drought, as many of you probably remember. The drought had been going on for years. And so they focused in on that event lawn, and they're like, well, you have this event lawn and this big green roof. Is it watered by reclaimed water? Well, it turns out that there's no source of reclaimed water in southern San Mateo County. So we had no option to do that. But even more problematic was when I approached the city building department to future-proof the building with purple pipe, they wouldn't allow it. They said it wasn't in the code books back then. That was 2013/2014. So we weren't allowed to put purple pipe in this building. So we never will be able to have this on reclaimed water, even if a source comes to San Mateo County. So, then people have asked me why we even thought about doing reclaimed water or an on-site system. And this is exactly what happened. This is the reason. We were getting hit by all these questions, why we're not using reclaimed water in our building. There wasn't a source. So our only option really for our next building was an on-site system. Well, at that particular time, let me just say, when we were building this building in 2014, the San Francisco Public Utilities Commission had just published its blueprint for on-site water systems. So, on-site water systems back then were, really hadn't been done much. There was, on the back of that cover of that publication is 181 Fremont, which has a gray water system in it, and it was just being built at the time. Well, we ended up taking over that building and leasing that building. So it's interesting that I saw that on the back cover years ago, and then I don't know, about 3 years ago, we leased that building. 3 or 4 years ago, we leased that building. So I think what's important to understand is that, no one was doing this. Blackwater in commercial buildings, wasn't happening at that time. There was gray water, as I say, but Blackwater really hadn't happened yet, even in San Francisco. And so, again, it's why did we decide to do this? Well, if we wanted to be responsible, we're in the middle of the drought, then it really made sense. And, there was no plans to do reclaimed water. And so I proposed it, and that kind of started the whole thing. But the city of Menlo Park, which is on Hetch Hetchy water, and here we're using this fabulous potable water for flushing toilets and irrigating plants and all this stuff. And they have a finite supply of Hetch Hetchy, like all cities do. So they expect to be maxed out on their supply of water by 2030. That's not far away. So at some point, they're going to have to restrict development based on their water supply. So again, another reason to really consider water reuse is the supply of our potable water. And you know, we wanted to be a sustainable company, and our employees look for, when they're hired, they're looking for a company that puts sustainability at the forefront. We wanted to be environmentally responsible, but also, you know, I think ultimately we wanted to support the community too and do the right thing for the city of Menlo Park and the community around us. So I just wanted to show at the beginning here what this, you know, what our goal was. This just shows when we were designing MPK 21 and 22, the next two Frank Gehry buildings, the goal was to have the recycled water, reclaimed water in the two buildings connected into the same system. So you see the orange, which is the wastewater, and the purple pipe. This very crude drawing is just, you know, it's supposed to illustrate very high level what's happening here. So, and then we have a 9-acre roof garden on MPK 20, but 21 is a much smaller roof garden. It's about a little under 4 acres. And then MPK 22 does not have a roof garden. It has terraces though. And on those terraces, we have we just finished MPK 22 and there's trees on the terraces. We'll be also irrigating the site level around 21 and a small area around 22. And that's primarily due to availability of the water. We had, you know, you can only recycle so much. And so our supply was enough for the interior of the buildings, as well as the roof of 21, the terraces, and then the site levels. So I'm just going to give you a quick overview of where we're collecting water, and then Marinas is going to get into the system. So I don't want to get in too much to the system right here, but this is just a high level view of what we're doing here. So the goal was to collect it from, you know, kitchen and bathroom sinks. And as you all know, I'm sure, kitchen sinks, when you collect water from kitchen sinks, it's black water, it's not gray water. So we had to have a black water system to collect it from the kitchen. Bathroom sinks, showers, toilets, it's recycled and treated. You know, the one thing I want to point out here is that when we were looking for a system, because we're using it on very sensitive landscape plants, including redwood trees, which we all know are super sensitive to TDS levels, dissolved solids and salts and such, our goal was to have water that was clean enough to water redwood trees and many of the other sensitive native plants that we have on our roofs. And actually MPK 21 is a pretty cool roof. 20 has mostly native plants. 21 has a mix of native plants, South African plants, and Australian plants. So it's really covering the Mediterranean region, which makes it really a fun roof garden. So again, I'm not going to go into a lot of detail here, but it just gives you a sense of how a system works. But what I do want to really focus on now, and I think everybody hopefully will appreciate this journey, because it wasn't an easy one, and yet the good news is, you know, as Steve mentions, and everybody is now focusing on ways to reuse water, because as we all know, California, we need to do that. With climate change, you know, water insecurity is going to be greater. I don't need to preach to the choir here, so you guys all know that. But I did want to take you on this journey, and sometimes when I'm giving this presentation, I've given it before, I skim over some of this, but I think because of what you do as a task force, I think you probably will be particularly interested in some of the details. So I wanted to make sure I cover it pretty carefully. But I think one of the things I wanted to say is, and I think Don alluded to it or mentioned it, was that no system had ever been approved, no Blackwater system had ever been permitted in District 17 of the Regional Water Quality Board, and or have ever been approved by the Division of Drinking Water. Now, as Don also said, as you know, the city and county of San Francisco has their own permitting process, and they are not required to get permitted by the state agencies. Lucky them, because they have their own system in place. Us unfortunates, those of us down the peninsula had to. Well, actually, in the end, it was very beneficial because we all learned a lot, and I think I'm hoping that the Water Quality Board and the Division of Drinking Water felt like they learned a lot too, because we painfully went through it together in a lot of ways, and I only say painfully because it was so new to all of us that we didn't, we had to learn what we were doing and understand the process. And so what we ended up with, as Don said, was it's the first district scale recycled Blackwater system in a commercial building, probably in the state of California, but also I don't think there's another one in the country. So that shows you that it was, at the time, there could be something now, but at the time there was nothing going on. So starting way back in 2014 here, I went to, I don't know if some of you are familiar with the Greener Builder conference that the US Green Building Council puts on, but I was attending that. We were in the middle of a drought, and so they had a lot on water and water efficiency there. Aquacel out of Australia was there. And Aquacel seemed like a really great system because it's very compact. It's high tech. I won't say easy to install because Marinas might say otherwise. But it has a lot of benefits over some other things. So when we were designing MPK 21, our next building that, as I said, has a 4-acre green roof, I was down at Frank Geary's office in Southern California and proposing sustainability to the architect team and the Facebook team about what we wanted to do. And I proposed, this Blackwater system. I said, we're in the middle of the drought. We really have to be responsible about our water use. We shouldn't be flushing Hetch water down our toilets, all this stuff. I went on and on, of course. They'd never done one either. So I had to try and convince everybody. Surprisingly, everybody got on board, and I still don't know how I convinced everybody, because I think in retrospect, if they knew what they were going to go through, they never would have said yes. But anyway, fortunately, they didn't know. It's like, when you have surgery or anything else, if you know what the pain's like, you'd probably never go through it. But fortunately, you don't know what the pain's going to be, and we didn't. So we went forward. But the Geary team had their own plan, and rather than evaluate all the different systems sort of right off the bat, they decided they wanted to put in a drain and fill wetland, which is basically what you see at the San Francisco Public Utility Commission building in downtown San Francisco on a very small scale. But this was going to be a giant drain and fill wetland to handle all the water from 21 and 22. And so we went down that path, and after, probably 8 months or 6 to 8 months of designing the system, we discovered, when it was, their initial estimate of what the cost would be, and it wasn't Frank Geary designing the system. It was, we hired a specialist who has done these things before, but they'd never done a really large one. They'd done sort of small and medium-sized ones, but never a large one. So it turned out that in the end, this drain and fill wetland, which requires a giant wetland and a lot of land, it would cost probably two and a half times what an aquasil system would cost. So it was going to be extremely expensive, had a huge footprint outside because it needed, being an unstable land, we're in earthquake country, this and that. It needed really, we couldn't just dig a hole and make a wetland. We had to, pour all this concrete and, et cetera. So it was going to be really expensive. But the one that our property manager just couldn't get on board with was we were going to have to haul off sludge daily. And that was like a non-starter for them. So you can imagine. So, so then we started evaluating different systems. And, but while we were going through all this evaluation of the wetland, the one that we decided not to build, we started our first meetings to see how we were going to get approval for this. So and I have to say, because Dennis is on the line, that Sustainable Silicon Valley was really focusing on water then, and as they still do, and were super supportive. I was working with someone there, Cindy Clark, and she and I were going to all these meetings, and we met with county supervisors, Dave Pine and Warren Slocum. And Dave Pine's a super sustainability champion, loved the idea, but they really couldn't help us in any way. They supported us, but there was no regulations that they could help us with. We also at that same time met with the San Mateo County Director of Environmental Health. She was actually really supportive too, but again, they haven't played a very small role. They just wanted to make sure the water was safe, there was no cross connection, etc. But what really started, assisting us was when we first met with the San Francisco Regional Water Quality Board. And I think Blair Allen there was I have to say, he was a real champion for recycled water, but really recognized there was no process and understood how difficult it was going to be. But he wanted to see this thing get built. So throughout the process, he was our cheerleader, if you can call it that, a quiet cheerleader. He really helped us understand the process, helped us understand who we needed to work with at the Division of Drinking Water, and got us started. Also, I just have to give a shout out to Azalea Mitch, who used to be at the city of Menlo Park, a city engineer there, because she had just come on board there. She was she specialized in water. That was her big thing, and she was really a supporter of doing something like this. And actually her husband works at Stanford, and he works in water at Stanford. So they also were supporters and helped us, because when we first proposed this to the City of Menlo Park Building Department, basically they said, he said, over my dead body, I will never approve this. It's not in the codes. There's no way that we can approve something like this that's not in the code books. Well, so that's where Sustainable Silicon Valley and I started working on the process and how we could get the city on board. So we had our internal advocate, Azalea, who's now with the city of San Mateo. And we had, the Regional Water Quality Board, who really thought this was something that, was a good idea if we could figure out a process to get there. Of course, it had to be safe and everything else. But we started doing educational sessions for the city. We introduced them to various types of water systems. You know, we were not specifically educating them just on our system, but on reclaimed black water in general. And then we did took the city up to the the public utility building in San Francisco to show them what that their system was there. And you know, the building department didn't come with us, but again, we just started working on that. So, you know, we went, you know, Sustainable Silicon Valley was holding their first symposiums on water, and that was helpful because the word started to get out that this is something you could do in commercial buildings. There are systems out there that you can use. Aquacel would present, others would present. And so it started getting becoming a mindset back then. And, you know, having just, I think 2016 maybe was the end of the drought, but maybe it was 2017, I can't remember now. But I think it was so fresh in everybody's mind that water, you know, was the next thing that we had to work on. So after a lot of evaluation, we did choose Aquacel. And we chose Aquacel because of its smaller footprint, because it's a self-contained system, which Marinas will show you at the end of the presentation. And because they offered a lot of support, it's high tech, you know, everything's monitored digitally. You know, they can monitor it from their systems in Australia, wherever they have their technology systems. And it was a lot less expensive, as I said, than the drain and fill wetland. So one of the things that began, you know, as we were designing the system, and finally we got some plans together, we discovered, well, actually, the Division of Drinking Water, in all of our conversations, super supportive team, but they said, well, wait a minute, Title 22 says you can't have reclaimed water in a building that produces food. So, as you know, as you may know, tech companies, food's really important to us, and we have cafes and kitchens in our building. But our interpretation was that we're not manufacturing food in kitchens. We are just producing food for our employees. And so we had a difference of interpretation with the Division of Drinking Water, and that was a big hurdle to get over. I think what finally got us over that is, you know, I remember going to our engineering offices with our engineering team, and we put the plans out on the table because our engineering team, of course, was really responsible for figuring out the system, how to integrate it in the building, the dual pipe system and everything. And we had lots of interactions, you know, from then on with the Division of Drinking Water. So we go to the offices in, where is it? I guess we went to the Division of Drinking Water offices. And we laid out the plans, and everybody gathers around the table. And I think everybody was a little bit cross-eyed looking at the plans because they were so complicated. And so you know, there was still this hurdle about, you know, well, you're going to have reclaimed water near food production, and you can't do that. And how can we tell there's cross connections in these plans? So fortunately, the engineering team suggested, well, I tell you what, why don't you come to our offices and we'll show you our 3D model of the building. That was a miracle. That really was the turning point in the approval process. something as simple as that, which of course the technology is not very simple, but as simple as seeing something more in real life than on a, you know, two-dimensional paper, you know, with these complicated plans, seeing it in 3D, all of a sudden the Division of Drinking Water team said, oh, well, we can visualize this now. You do not have cross-connection issues according to your plans. And they negotiated, I'm not sure if that's the correct term, but they figured out, the team figured out, it was both the Division of Drinking Water, our architect team, the engineering team, figured out that because we're on a podium level and the parking's underneath the building, we could redirect all purple pipe below the building and keep it out of any food production areas completely. And then there's no danger of having any contamination in our food. So that, you know, and hopefully Marinus can say more to that further on, but I think that was the turning point. And really it helped us along the way. So you know, once we had that going, we really started, we knew we could get this done. And in December of 2016, the building department, after much internal discussion with their engineer and lots of meetings with our Facebook team and the engineers and such, decided that if the state agencies approved the permits and approved the project, then they would go along with that. So what that did is it took it out of his hands, and he didn't have to worry that because it's not in the code books, it wasn't going to come back to the city and be a problem for them. So once he said that, you know, made that determination, then we were free to move forward with the system. And I just want to also mention that we had this great meeting with Darren Polhamus of the water quality boards. He was concerned about maintenance and monitoring, as you can imagine. So he was doing, in fact, he, again, Sustainable Silicon Valley helped with the meetings. He was doing a tour of other campuses, all the campuses in Silicon Valley that were considering on-site water. So he came to Facebook, he went to Google, I think he went to Microsoft. And once he saw, and then we had a conference call with Aquacel in Australia during that meeting. And they spelled out exactly what the monitoring system, how it was designed, how it would happen, how the maintenance process would happen, and that long-term oversight. And the fact that Facebook had the ability to have someone on site that was certified in you know, water systems, because we have a property management team, that they could hire someone that was certified. They could be on site all the time and monitor this system. Then he decided he felt comfortable with this, and that again was another turning point for us. So I think it's a good time to turn this over to Marinus, who's going to tell you about, you know, this just got us to 2017. We're in 2020, almost 2021 here. So there's a whole other number of years in there about the building process. And that's what Marinus is going to tell you about. So Marinus, I'll turn it over to you.
Thanks, Lauren. Compared to you, our journey was pretty easy by the sounds of it. It's probably going to be hard to believe for some people, but after all of that, our path wasn't just roses and sunshine. We had a couple of unicorns and a troll that we had to deal with as well along the way. in this whole process. But with all the approvals to start construction and all the buy-in and approvals from the regulatory agencies, we set off to construct the whole system, which in honesty, Lauren said it was easy. In all honesty, it was relatively easy to construct. That was probably the easiest part of this whole process, is to build out the system. You can just quickly jump to the next slide, to Lauren, then we can hop back to this one. Part of our construction was, putting in a couple of 40,000 gallon storage tanks for clean water and for the dirty water coming in. That was, in the bay mud. That was a bit of a challenge. And then, as Lauren mentioned as well, one of our other challenges is we don't have a lot of space in the building to dedicate to this entire system. And that is, again, as Lauren said, where Aquacel came in, and they delivered a very small space for a lot of work that takes place in there as well, which is really just over 1,000 square foot for an entire system of 90,000 gallons per day that it can process is pretty significant for us. We don't have a lot of space to give up for it as well. So that so that was pretty easy to do. Our systems is installed now, and I'm not an expert on how all this works. Quite honestly, I'm not in the engineering side of it, but it's pretty. It's a nice system. If you guys want to come look at it, it's well worth it, and well worth looking into if you have constrained spaces. So if we can go back to the journey. Basically, we started our construction. We got through the process of that 2018. The system was ready in May of 18. We started discussions with all the regulatory agencies again, including West Bay Sandy District. We needed, obviously, our provisional discharge permit to start all of our commissioning on the system. And then start our dirty water commissioning to get bioassay done, so we can get the bioassay reviewed and approved by the Division of Drinking Water, which then gives the recommendation for the San Francisco Regional Water Quality Control Board for approval of the system. So with that in mind, there were some lengthy discussions with West Bay Sanitary District, and understandably so. Again, a new system, not knowing what the impact is of the water or the sludge that we're going to be sending down their pipes, and what the impact is to their substation, their lift stations and their pipes. So, I could understand their position of being cautious with what this is going to do to their back end, and then back end of their treatment systems as well, with elevated salt levels and such, right? So we worked through all of that, and now we have a pretty extensive monitoring system. We had to install a bunch of extra monitoring wells for salinity and such, but we now have a provisional discharge permit, and we could and we can start our commissioning. But before that, our system was complete installation in May of 2018. We had the reclaim system all ready to go in June, when we're looking at getting TCO, which is where when we thought we had a building construction approval, where there was a huge curveball thrown at us at that. The building official came back and said, well, even though we did approve the system as is, their interpretation of dual plumbing is totally different from what they've approved and what all the regulatory agencies approved, and what their understanding were, where they came back and said, well, dual plumbing means that every fixture that you're feeding into the building must have a separate feed of potable water to the fixture. Otherwise, we can't approve the building for occupancy. So this was maybe 3 weeks before we wanted to occupy the building, and we had to replumb our entire building for potable water to all of our fixtures to satisfy this one requirement by the building official. That was a big hurdle. The other hurdle that we had with that was that the building official then decided that we're not allowed to talk to the Division of Drinking Water or the Regional Water Quality Board or West Bay Sanitary District, and all communication has to go through him. which then complicated the entire system or our entire process again, with pulling away our ability to talk to the partners that we've been working closely with, and was very helpful in the system, that we could not communicate with them anymore directly. So that was another constraint that we had. Along the line somewhere, someone in the background probably had some discussions with them internally in Facebook, and I'm probably sure from the Division of Drinking Water and the Regional Water Quality Board that was pretty unhappy with that, unhappy with the fact that we've now installed a bunch of pipe in the building that actually is conducive to cross connect, and actually is contradictory to Title 22, where they state that these systems need to be installed as simple as possible so that you do not allow for cross connect. So now we had a very complicated system that was conducive to cross connect because you had all this extra pipe in the building, which we then were allowed to take out a couple of months after we installed it. So that speak to me of it's a new system. People weren't familiar with the code. The code doesn't really talk with each other, like Title 22 and the California Plumbing Code didn't contemplate systems like this. And in some cases, they are contradictory. And if you leave it open to jurisdiction that is very conservative, their interpretations is contradictory to Title 22. And then now you sit in this position where you can't satisfy both, but for the construction purposes, you have to satisfy the authority having jurisdiction for construction. So that was a big lesson learned for us out of 21. Fortunately, on 22, we had a new building official that was way more receptive to this and understanding of the code. We had all the knowledge we had out of 21, and we had all the backup from the Division of Drinking Water, Regional Water Quality Board, all the regulatory agencies. We had West Bay satisfied as well. So when we started with 22, the process was already smoother, and we could see the fruits of our labor that we went through on MPK 21. So those are some of the items that we're looking at, that we're hoping that the industry is catching up on, the code is catching up on, and the regulatory agencies are catching up on, and how you work with local building officials and regional officials, and how the code can speak with each other and complement each other to help out projects like this, that that really does help the environment out. So that's what we're looking for as well. Jump back a little bit. We got our West Bay Sanitary District discharge permit. We started with our dirty water commissioning, and we were just starting with our clean water commissioning for our bioassay when COVID hit. So COVID hit, and then we didn't have enough people in the building to actually supply dirty water into the system, and we had to mothball our system again. So since March, the system has just been sitting idle, and we're trying to keep the bioorganisms alive as best we can, and waiting for the building to be occupied again to complete our dirty water commissioning and bioassays, and get all that completed. I think we did our bioassay that went out to the Division of Drinking Water. I think we got the letter of recommendation that went out to the San Francisco Regional Water Quality Board. So I think that process was very smooth and went really well. So now we're just waiting for the system to be back up and running, and waiting for the San Francisco Regional Water Quality Board approval for our permit to operate. So all in all, it was a roller coaster of a journey. I think we all, I learned a lot through this process, and I'm hoping that what we have learned can foster or can help other people out as well in the industry that has the ability to do things like this, number one, and has the will to do it, number two. So I think this pilot project, if you will, hoping that helps out a lot of other people as well. And then, yeah, a couple of other slides where we talked about the installation. We talked about that. We talked about the process in there. And here's just a couple of snapshots of why we're doing it. And Lauren talked about it a little bit in the beginning. Is how do we conserve water? We do have a lot of green roofs. We do have a lot of green space. We have a lot of trees and things like that. I think in the 90,000 gallons a day that we process in summer when there is or winter when there's we will limit out on our water usage in the system, but this is the biggest capacity that we could have put in. So best case we use all the water, worst case we use all the water and we need to supplement a little bit when we need to. And that's the Bayfront campus for what we're looking at now. At the bottom end, you can see there's a parking garage with PV on it. That's constructed now, permitted, done. So we're done with that one. MPK 22 is nearing completion as well. Cross Connect, we've done that in MPK 22. Everything went really smoothly on that one. We now have our operator in there as well, Class 3 operator. And now we're looking at how are we going to be doing our reporting for the West Bay component of it and the processes for our annual report that we need to provide for Cross Connect certification, as well as our 4-year testing that we need to do on that. The bottom right-hand corner is the green is the park that we're building. We just started construction on that one. A little bit of work with the EPA. Again, as Lauren mentioned, that our previous tenants weren't as environmentally friendly, and we have to do a significant cleanup now as well, again, in the park area to get it to an unlimited use so we know that everybody's safe in there. So a lot of work going on currently, a lot of effort going into the teams, again, to clean up the space so we can have ultimately an entire clean campus and a sustainable campus. And that's our journey for construction in a nutshell.
I'll stop sharing.
Thank you. I'm going to reclaim host and give it over to Dennis.
Dennis, before you start, sorry, just want to interject that I just want to, thank the teams that were involved, particularly the state agencies, the Division of Drinking Water, the SF Regional Water Quality Board were amazing partners and really helped us through this process. And there's no way we could have done it without their careful, guidance. And so I think they became real partners in this. And I just want to pass that on to everybody that, these state agencies are there to assist and make sure that we're producing clean water and not harmful water. And in the end, I think it all turned out pretty well.
Thank you again, Lauren and Marinas. This is Don. I wanted to just quickly comment about what a wonderful story you told, and your presentation was very comprehensive and gave folks a real picture and feel for what you had to go through. And I think journey, like you said, is sagas or words to describe this. And I know at times it felt like the two of you were probably pushing a huge boulder up a mountain, but you made it. And congratulations. And I wanted to just ask really quickly, we'll take some additional questions at the end, but how many people do the two buildings serve?
It's close to just under 6,000. So it's roughly 3,000 per building, 2,800 per building.
So it's like kind of like a little city in a way. And
we have a development agreement, and that's what we're, our development agreement says is what those buildings should hold.
Okay, quite a few people. It's like a little city in a way, just those two buildings. And just to confirm, the recycled wastewater is being used for, you had a drawing on this, toilet and urinal flushing inside the buildings, landscape irrigation on your beautiful green roofs and around, are you doing anything with cooling towers? Is any water being used for that?
No.
No,
Are there plans later or just not
we
enough?
didn't have enough water.
Not enough. Yeah.
Okay. And just lastly, I wanted to just add, you mentioned that, like everyone, we're all working from home now. Are there, and this is very speculative, I'm sure on your part, but any ideas when folks might start to return to the buildings to generate some wastewater for you?
Well, yeah, the latest message was that we may have some returning at the end of H1 2021, but that hinges on people being, able to get vaccines, safety measures. We've got a lot of new protocols being developed. And so it would be a very small population that would move back into the buildings, but these would be employees that are, critical to the operation of our platform and our campuses and such. And so it would be a small number if at the end of H1. Like so many tech companies, we've been told that we don't have to come back until H2. But even then, if those vaccines aren't available to the average person, there's not going to be, there's going to be people that have the option not to come back right away.
Okay, interesting. Thank you. And I know Dennis is ready to go there, but I just see there's one more question that was submitted in the chat. I want to just ask real quickly of the Facebook team. There's a question about, was there a plan for sea level rise at this campus? Because you are.
Oh, well, funny you should ask. That's actually a very good question right now. Well, first of all, our buildings are built, we have to build them up, and we're developing a new campus on Willow Road called Willow Village that actually has to be above, I think it's 3 feet above. Is that right, Marinas?
It's 2 feet above the 100-year flood.
Yeah. So, but the reason why I say this is a really interesting conversation is that the San Francisco Joint Powers Authority and the Safer Bay Project, which some of you may have heard about, have been working for over a decade. Actually, we partnered with them on a design early on levees for from Redwood City, from the border of Menlo Park, Redwood City down to East Palo Alto and border of Palo Alto. And but that was, I think I first partnered with them in 2013 or 2012 maybe, but they were going through design and regulatory and EIR and such. So I just found out about a project that is moving forward. The city of Menlo Park and PG&E are going for a FEMA grant to build levees from East Palo Alto, which is already building theirs. They already got a FEMA grant. So from the end of their project around the PG&E substation, which serves hundreds of thousands of people on the peninsula, including Facebook, very important project. And so they came to us when they had already completely decided to move forward, and just a couple of weeks ago, and said, oh, by the way, we're doing this. Do you want to join us? And, because Classic Campus is in the middle of the bay, essentially. Well, not exactly, but, it's surrounded by water. It's vulnerable. It was not built, that was built in, I think it opened in '93. So they were not thinking about sea level rise back then. So it has a little levee around it, but it is not an official levee. It's not a certified levee. And we've had it surveyed multiple times and they say the same thing. Plus there's trees growing in it. So, anything with a levee with a tree growing in it, yeah, there's no way that could be a certified levee. So surprisingly, I got approval from our leadership team to join that project. And so we're going to partner with the City of Menlo Park, Safer Bay, and PG&E to go for this FEMA grant. And so it would build a levee around Classic Campus and go all the way up to Bedwell Bayfront Park. So it would not only protect us, it would protect Belhaven, the community of Belhaven. So keeping our fingers crossed on that project.
Very interesting. Wow, thank you for that. Okay, I want to make sure to give Dennis a chance to tell us about a sustainable Silicon Valley and all the wonderful things they're doing, and also some perspective on on-site or decentralized reuse projects in the South Bay. And I'm really pleased to have Dennis with us. He's the director of Sustainable Silicon Valley's Water and Sustainable Life program. So with that, Dennis, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Thank you, Don. Yes, it's certainly, quite a story. I was wondering during the presentation who's going to play Lauren and Marinus in the movie, the making of water reuse. And I guess we can take a poll on that later. And one other thought, my thoughts are with the bacteria that have been idling since March, and I hope that they are well and survive and when systems start up. So little shout out to microscopic organisms. Facebook's leadership in this has been, I keep referring to it as the bleeding edge, and it was one of those things where kind of someone had to, get the ball rolling and get started, and sometimes it seemed like, I guess, the equivalent of building the plane while it's flying, the kind of the interesting thing, something of a takeaway is, that I think there's probably not so much issues about the technologies involved. It's more it was more about like worlds colliding and the interconnections. For instance, I mean, a lot of developing the relationship with West Bay trying to figure out how to characterize the interconnection and the relationship, how to price it. All these things were just had to be drawn up. And I have a perspective as far as actually I did head the Green Building Council in California, their policy arm, and we actually sponsored a bill, AB 2282, which was the Purple Pipe Bill way back when, and had a number of things about trying to instill water reuse in buildings prior even to SB 966. And it always, I definitely have a sense of the difficulties involved. So I really salute what Lauren and Marinus have been able to do. And so the idea of the this is a classic kind of public-private partnership aspect, and I think it's on the hopefully the kind of the tough work has been done, and the rewards can be reaped. In general, though, there's an issue with sea level rise, for instance, on the public side, as far as that's where all the on the bay, that's where all the water treatment plants are. And we've just had a couple days of king tides, for instance, and it looks like that's going to be a bit more of the norm as well. And but this satellite systems approach is going to be very useful in future, both with public and private entities. Mainly because of this decentralization idea is going to be important in a changing environment. So I'm going to circle back to these kinds of thoughts in a way. I'm just going to go through a couple lightning round of slides, and we'll starting now. Sustainable Silicon Valley is celebrating its 20th year. We were kind of the redheaded stepchild of Cal EPA. We started out as a carbon inventory project, and there's always also been this affiliation with NASA, and right now our chief scientist, Tony Strawa, is a reformed NASA scientist. This graphic has been very important, and I'm just, this is 12,000 years of climate data in terms of compared to a mean, and this was from the University of Reading, the kind of the famous band thing. This is 2,000 years, so you can really see the Anthropocene and what the Industrial Revolution has done. I mean, you see here the invention of the steam engine. And we've all know that there's, you know, something kind of wrong with the system. So this kind of stuff really drives it home. There's even a very unpopular name called solastalgia, that is a bit of a term of art when you feel like basically your home's under assault. So one side of Sustainable Silicon Valley is actually air quality. And Tony Strawa is an expert in particulate matter and ground level ozone, and he and Drew have been working on a number of air quality equipment and different projects. You've probably seen this, but I mean, in terms of particulate matter, things are relative size. The famous 2.5 particulate matter is this red area here. And then another topical thing, I mean, here's the size of the coronavirus versus that. You know, it's so much smaller, but luckily you see the size of reverse osmosis membrane and nanofiltration membranes are smaller still. One other aspect that we've been involved in quite a bit is a decarbonization, and there's been a great, and this involves building codes as well, and there's really been a lot of progress in this. Up and down California, I think there's more potential. I mean, Hayward is involved as well. There's more potential in the East Bay for this as well. So we're kind of coming for you. I have to say that we're getting back to that idea of taco trucks on every corner, and looking to move forward. In terms of just a little bit of an impact story, involving air quality, we had this situation actually in East Palo Alto when we were all kind of very worried about outdoor air quality. There weren't any local measurements, and so we were able to work with a number of people in East Palo Alto, and as of today, there's quite a bit of measurement as well. So we were able to guide that process. And I know there's things going on as well. And I think actually Lauren's been involved with in Bellhaven. So anyway, getting back to water, the water program has a few stools, and one is Wet Talks. We will be debuting this thing called Water Roundtables, and then our annual event, which is actually coming up, is Waterpalooza. First, a little bit about just when I was talking about water and the decentralization of it. This is a pretty good illustration of it, and this was from a Renewit project that was doing a bit of like optimization of systems, and both in terms of decision making and mapping, has an unfortunate name, IRRT. But you can see here, I mean, the difference between this idea of centralized treatment and, you know, the cost involved, and then this issue about satellite treatment. And so it does make a ton of intuitive sense, and then actually as it gets looked at further, really starts to pencil out, as a kind of an architecture. And so this is, I suppose, that simple idea of, if there were, for instance, in southern San Mateo County, at the start of this, if there were, treatment opportunities and Purple Pipe to hook up to, that would have been probably the best way to go for Facebook, but they didn't have that. So they had to kind of invent their own. And other campuses like Microsoft is actually, their Mountain View campus is coming online very soon. Google, their projects in Mountain View are, they have a number of them that are established and working. And Salesforce is in is looking to come online early next year in San Francisco, and that's a high-rise project as well. But this ultimately, this satellite system approach, I think, is something we're going to see more of, both in private campuses, but also even in public utilities. I mean, and it's funny because it's really comes down to essentially the same equipment, some of the same technologies. It's really, the question is just who owns it, and so that's and then how do these things interconnect with other systems? And so I often talk about the water grid, which has more in common even with the electrical grid than not. And in terms of even ownership, if things are monitored, good sensors are used, you can have a lot of management control over these things and quality assurance that kind of hopefully will get past a lot of the problems of the past as well. One other thing that's actually coming online is the North County Water Reuse Agreement, and that's Valley Water, Palo Alto, and Mountain View, where Valley Water is investing money that has accrued for the North Santa Clara County to build a plant in Palo Alto. Palo Alto does the treatment, but their water has very high solids in it, and it's not suitable for trees. I know Lauren was talking about redwood trees and the sensitivity. Palo Alto's recycled water has proven to kill redwood trees, and but more advanced processing from Valley Water will take the kind of salt content down further and make it more suitable for use. And that's quite a nice win, because right now, in terms of recycled water, 96% of it was going into the bay. And ironically, it wasn't even salty enough for the bay. It was just, so the fact that if it can get processed more, it will be much more of a benefit. And I think something like over 60 companies are signed up now to receive that water once the plant gets built and gets operational. And also in terms of water reuse, we're seeing across the area in Monterey is actually doing potable reuse. They're doing groundwater recharge I mentioned Valley Water, and then Soquel Creek in Santa Cruz, Soquel is on board for, they've gotten a lot of funding. They're breaking ground on a treatment plant that will also help them with, they have a different issue since they use groundwater, but they have sea incursion, and they really have to kind of keep that in check. As I keep saying, there's a reason they call it even further south, the Salinas Valley. It's the ocean wants to get in there. So I mentioned we have something coming up on December 3rd and 4th. That's Waterpalooza. A lot of things that were mentioned, like SB 966 and Darren Polimas, Division of Drinking Water. He's speaking on the Friday. We should have kind of a report on the Microsoft campus. There's going to be a lot going on there. Our wet talks have been a popular series. This first one was with Felicia Marcus, and we had another in terms of what was it, Julie London, shout out, Crimea River, where we got into water demand estimates and their history, and then we most recently had something about water reuse in Silicon Valley from Ann Thibault, doing a study on actually in Santa Clara and San Mateo County potential. And Amelia Luna has been a real go-to engineer in the past for different reuse projects as well. The other thing we're doing is launching the Water Roundtable. This is a series of events, and it was originally conceived when we were actually using real tables and people met in person. But in this case, it'll be virtual. We're starting off with about workforce development with the heads of Valley Water, East Bay Mud, and SFPUC, talking about the silver tsunami, about the retirements that are poised to hit the water industry, and the prospect for equity and workforce development. So we're talking about aqua color jobs as far as that goes, along with a lot of other different things, including wastewater as a multi-benefit resource, even in terms of COVID outbreaks in various geographies and with populations, and also have some pretty new research. We're bringing some professors from Purdue, of all places, that are kind of experts in NatTech disasters. Basically, what happens when water systems get depressurized and start basically sucking in volatile organic compounds and the things needed for that. We also have another program that is working in terms of microfiltration, and we've looked to provide some disaster relief packaging, as well as very portable filtration that can process a fair amount of water just in a very small footprint, and produce potable water in situations, whether of disaster or just other issues in areas where there is not clean water that's available. Last thing is, we have a new program that we're be debuting very soon called Sustainable Life. And, we do take dives into, water issues and air quality, traffic and mobility. But at the end of the day, you're going to go home and make dinner. And so this is really about everyone else and everything else. And it will span, it's really looking to infuse this idea of, sustainability as a front of mind concept. And so if you want to kind of hit our website or something, we'll have a whole lot more on this very soon. And with that, I will take my leave and go from there. I'm sure Don has a few more questions that he didn't get to.
Thanks, Dennis.
And thank you, Dennis. That was very informative and really kind of tied everything together and told us about some things that are really neat things that are happening down in your area and Silicon Valley area. And I also want to, if you haven't taken a look at Sustainable Silicon Valley, SSV has a great website, talks about their events, and you guys are really doing a lot of neat things to advocate for water and water reuse. So I think that's much appreciated. We're just about out of time now. It's just a couple minutes before our stop time at 10. I don't see any questions from the group. And I think is it anyone else? Dennis, any final comments? Anyone else have final comments before I turn it over to Dan? Well, thank you again. I think we're just about 10 o'clock. I just want to make one final comment, and Dennis and I think Lauren touched on SB 966, Senate Bill 966, which was passed a couple of years ago, that will require the state to develop regulations for on-site reuse systems that local agencies could adopt. And that's supposed to be done by 2022. So that will hopefully eliminate some of the challenges and things that folks like Facebook have experienced. So stay tuned for SB 966, more to come.
Okay, Dan McIntyre again. So thanks, Don, for moderating and organizing this. And thanks to our main speakers today, Lauren and Dennis. Great job. Exciting hearing about some of the corporate and other special projects in the recycling world. So really cool. I've got no final announcements, but I did want to share or remind there's not a meeting next month, but we are meeting on January 19th. It'll be Zoom again, and that'll be Lawrence Livermore Lab talking about getting to neutral on carbon emissions. So with that, I think the meeting is concluded, and I wish everybody happy holidays. Everybody stay safe, and we'll see you all in January.
Thanks, Dan. Bye, everyone.
Thank you.